I would like to ask you all to please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, your job, and how you got into aviation. So I'm going to start with you, Louisa.
Thank you. So I'm Louisa Smith. I'm Head of Research and Development at NATS. I have started my career in the Air Force as an air traffic control officer, but working both in the en route sector and the tower sector as well. I did a variety of tours there and then joined NATS after about 5-6 years in the Air Force. I joined the research and development team, and then I was lucky enough to do a development opportunity where I was the executive assistant to the CEO, and then came back as head of R&D just over 4 years ago. I've had a year's maternity leave recently and have a young daughter, which is obviously a bit of a challenge at the moment to get back into the swing of things once the COVID lockdown has eased. And that's how I kind of got into this role. I manage a large team. Sarah's part of that team. There's 33 people in the R&D team. And Teresa, you're also part of the R&D team. So yeah, we've got a great team that are looking at the future of air traffic.
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Teresa. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Dow, and as Louisa said, I'm one of the team leads in R&D currently. When I graduated in 2002 as an engineer, and for the first 4 years of my career, I worked as a systems engineer on designing military satellites. I then moved to NATS in 2006 and joined the R&D team back then. And my sort of first few years was mainly focused as a systems engineer, looking at surveillance research on radar technology and what comes next after radar. I then joined the Optimized Separation Concepts team, and I led a big European SESAR project looking at what was called enhanced time-based separation on final approach. And then in 2018, I became team lead for the Advanced Tools and Concepts team. And within that team, we design lots of the new tools that go into the operations rooms for the controllers to use, as well as a lot of the algorithms that are sort of behind them. So things that predict where the aircraft will be, monitor the aircraft on their trajectories, and sort of detect if there may be potential conflicts in the future and come up with resolutions. So that's my main background.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Teresa. So good afternoon to all around in UK and around the world. I work in NATS UK office as the head of UTM strategic development. I'm responsible for ensuring that NATS UTM capabilities develop in a way that meets the safety commitment to our airspace users. I'm also responsible for addressing the long-term business risk to NATS. Before joining NATS last year, I used to work in Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. I was in the program office enabling innovative drone users in Singapore. I was involved in one of the larger air taxi flights in the middle of the city center. And if any of you have been to Singapore, it's not exactly a huge country. So in the city center, there's a huge crowd that was easily drawn to the air taxi flight. Within CAS, I've also held other roles. I implemented the safety program at the state level, which was really interesting because it was a case where the regulators themselves were being regulated by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. And my first job in the CAA was a different field. I was responsible for kickstarting an R&D ecosystem in a specific niche area of air traffic management. So it feels like a full circle together when today's topic is about ATM R&D. I'm very excited to be joining this panel with these wonderful ladies, and I'm sure we'll get to share and learn from each other in this very short session. And thank you for sacrificing your lunch hour for those people in UK. You can be munching behind the desk for all I know.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'll make my words Elizabeth's words as well. So let's dive right into our questions. The first question is, I guess, the big word of this webinar is collaboration. So why do we work collaboratively with partners in research projects? So if hosting a conference like this gives us the opportunity to showcase the collaborative research that NATS is working on and in air traffic management. But why do we work collaboratively, and why don't we do this alone? So I'm going to address this question first to you, Louisa. Louisa, can you take us through the importance of collaboration in air traffic management research, please?
Yeah, so collaboration is kind of key, and I know that's a bit of a phrase that everyone says, but it really is in research and development. You know, as hopefully people have seen on the conference, we're trying to showcase some of the activities that we have that we're underway at the moment, and really invite people to come and speak to us about potential opportunities to collaborate in the future. With aviation air traffic management, there's a huge amount of stakeholders involved, and so moving and progressing things to the future, looking at how aviation can advance in the future as well, we need to have a number of different stakeholders involved to help move that forward. It's also really important for us to engage with universities and academics. They have a huge knowledge, and we can leverage off of that, and that mix with our expertise within the organisation can really bring out some amazing research that can have great findings and help influence the way the future is going. Recently, obviously, with the impact of COVID has had a huge impact on the aviation industry. I think the last time I checked, the UK is about 60% recovered on traffic as it was in 2019. We're a little bit behind the rest of Europe on the recovery, but actually we're still expecting traffic levels to increase in the future, and we need to make sure that we're building back better, and we're advancing aviation in all areas, including environmental impact, as well as you know, making sure that we've got the capacity to deal with new airspace users, which obviously Elizabeth is our key kind of expert on that for today. But also make sure that we've got can deal with the anticipated traffic levels of airlines as well, when hopefully people are able to travel as they were before.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think it's probably worth adding there as well. I mean, we've got some fantastic work with universities, as Louisa said, but we're also quite a lot of our work is part of the CESAR programme, which is the Single European Skies ATM research. And we've been working with them since 2009, and that gives us access to work with sort of industry experts, other air navigation service providers, airspace users, all sorts of people in our industry to help sort of produce a much more efficient, smarter, greener, safer environment for ATM.
And so just to add on to that, and especially in the university area and startups, different companies like that, they're really in the space to progress some of these new technologies that are coming to make us ensure that we have the knowledge that we need in companies like ourselves to be able to advance what we're doing as well.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so Louisa left me this liner for the new airspace users, so I just want to elaborate on that. So we expect a wide range of airspace users in the near future. It's going to be happening within our lifetime. In fact, it's happening elsewhere in other parts of the world, from the smaller drones to the larger air taxi types, where you can have at least 1 or 2 passengers. And then we also have the higher altitude platforms, so the ones that will fly close to the Earth's surface, but actually in reality they're closer to the space. So that's why I have this background. So, and this is partly driven by the new business models. We have the traditional drivers for airspace still, the people traveling, people not just recreational, but also search and rescue, military, and these new drivers are supplemented by other forms of service provision. You could be using drones for inspection, for surveillance, or even hop into a drone for sightseeing in the future. So these are all leading edge technologies, and there's a lot of collaboration happening, not just within the industry, but in partnership with governments. And in UK, obviously, it would be the UK CAA. NATS has also been contributing right at the start, providing our expertise in airspace management, how to integrate these airspace users safely and efficiently, so that it makes sense for the business case to fly in UK airspace. At the same time, we are not compromising the risk of existing manned aviation. I can touch more about the regulatory sandboxes initiative that NATS has contributed later on.
Yeah, just to add on to Elizabeth, just triggered my memory there. There's other work that we do as well with our regulators, and there's quite a few initiatives out there as well that support through the government that support research in a collaborative sense as well. So as Elizabeth said, there's the Future Flight Challenge, which is a challenge funding to look at electric and autonomous aircraft, which NATS are participating in, as a huge amount of industry and academic partners as well. Sarah mentioned the CESAR as well, when that links into other collaboration across Europe, but also into regulation as well. And then there's also initiatives like Fly Zero, which is run by the Aerospace Technology Institute, which really showcases how the industry needs to join up together and to collaborate to ensure that we're getting a better ATM or aviation sector, and we can't do that independently as NATS. So collaboration is really key for us, and we really hope that out of this session and out of this research collaboration conference, we've got some new people that we haven't partnered with before coming to speak to us about where we can work with them.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'd like to ask you about what these collaborations have in fact achieved. So specifically, if we look at a control room of 20 years ago, for example, and we look at a control room of today, what has changed and what role did research and development and collaboration, particularly in research and development, play in that change? I'm going to start with Louisa again.
Yeah, so I think there's a huge amount of change. 20 years ago, it doesn't, sometimes these things don't feel that long in aviation, but actually if you looked at what has happened, it's in NATS's ops room as well, we've got enhancement of tools and controller tools that support the controller, enabling them to do their job and to move aircraft around safely. There's a huge, obviously, another kind of area which is been quite recently people will have heard about is the digital towers as well, where there's a huge amount of research and collaboration with different partners to enhance that, as you're sat behind the screen, Teresa, in your background. So there's loads of research that we've done that have kind of spanned a long period, which have enhanced the ops room. So it might be better that Sarah can probably give more specific examples, having been involved in some of those work herself.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So you talk about increased number of tools. Well, absolutely. So over the last 20 years, as everybody probably knows, the amount of traffic has increased considerably. So we have provided quite a large number of support tools to the controllers to help manage their workload, and also to help make the flight profiles as efficient as possible. A couple of those examples there are many, but I'll throw in a couple. Time-based separation is one that's recently been introduced and was originally part of a CESAR project, so working with European partners, and that looks at more resilience on the approach to Heathrow Airport. So in strong headwind conditions, the ground speed of the aircraft is obviously slower, and we used to separate by distance for the aircraft, so the landing rate was reduced in strong headwind conditions. The research shows that the wake vortex off the wings can actually be dissipated in some of those weather conditions, and it means that we can start to decrease some of the spacings, and we actually now space those aircraft by time rather than distance, so that we can maintain some of those landing rates, and that has helped maintain the landing rates considerably in those weather conditions in Heathrow. Another good example would be around some of our arrivals managers, so our AMAN system, which looks at arrivals into airports sort of over extended distances, and it will take into consideration things like wake vortex or the trajectory, the estimated time of arrival, what's going on at that airport, and presents an optimized sequence to the supervisor in the operations room. And even beyond that, we've worked through another CESAR project we've worked through is XMAN, which is a cross-border arrival. So we're looking at a much larger distance across into other ANSPs, right out to sort of 350 miles. And we can look at starting to change sort of the speeds of aircraft to slow aircraft down to prevent all of the really low level holding, which therefore gives us a lot of advantage in terms of fuel costs, environmental, and also sort of your customer experiences as well. So those are a couple of examples, but there are a lot more that we could talk about in terms of tools.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you spoke earlier about the regulatory sandboxes. So I wanted to explore this topic a little bit more. So we know that regulations play a part in new airspace users. How do regulations affect the work that we do to integrate these new airspace users?
Sure. So before we talk about the regulatory sandbox, I think I just want to take a step back on why do regulations need to change. And the fact is, the conventional manned aviation depends on air traffic management or the pilot's ability to see other aircraft, see and avoid other aircraft. And drones, air taxis, and high altitude platforms, they perform very differently from conventional manned aviation because there is not going to be a pilot on board the aircraft to see and avoid other aircraft. So they would need to be managed very differently. And so the challenge for us is to reconcile all these different ways of operating and enabling these aircraft, whether it is manned or unmanned, and allow them to operate safely and efficiently in the same sky. So I've got so many examples. I'm just going to pick out the ones that are super interesting to me. So last year, my NETS colleagues, I've got many wonderful NETS colleagues who have a lot of expertise, and they got to make this happen. They helped the Maritime Coast Guard Agency in search and rescue function. So, in assessing how remotely piloted and uncrewed aircraft can actually help in search and rescue. And the trial flights involved several test missions. There was one that took 10 hours long, which is an incredible feat. It transited from West Wales Airport through controlled airspace and all the way up to Ireland to perform a low-level overwatch segment. And this is incredible because it actually passed through 3 different air navigation service providers. It passed through controlled airspace alongside commercial manned aviation, and there is a huge difference in speed between the unmanned aircraft and the conventional manned aviation. There's someone who described at work as it's like operating a push bike along a motorway. It's that type of difference in speed. So the aircraft was handled by the air traffic controllers in the same manner as other manned aircraft. The NetSonic team that's not that far away from my office now, they help to plan and communicate and conduct the operation safely. So that's one, search and rescue. The second one that I'm happy to just share more about, also because it's very fresh in our mind, is it was only public within the last week. My colleagues also helped flight trials, the military drone called the Sky Guardian for the military drone as part of the joint exercise. It traveled from RAF Wallington in Lincolnshire all the way up to RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland, Moray. And to give you an idea of how long the journey is, I did a quick map view of it last night. So I can tell you safely it was 8.5 hours if you drove up one direction. I don't suppose you want to drive up now with petrol. So the flight demonstration was controlled through very complex airspace. It was more complex than any of the previous UAS flights in UK. It helped us validate the existing methods of control. They are equally applicable to controlling remotely controlled aircraft. And if the aircraft performs the same way as Sky Guardian. So I've given you search and rescue, military. Can I also talk about a third example if I haven't run out of time? And that is about medical supply delivery. And that was really the hot topic last year during COVID. It was also part of a regulatory sandbox when NETS helped Skyports, one of our close industry partners to, and also NHS was involved, and AGS Airport was also involved in the medical delivery trial up in Isle of Man. It was funded under the UKRI. I think Louisa mentioned the Future Flight Challenge, so that was funded under that. And what was so exciting about it is that the project proved the benefits of either future offshore renewables and also the fact that it helps that remote connectivity with Highland and islands. Yeah, so 3 examples that we've gotten: search and rescue, military, and medical supply.
Yeah, thank you. 3 very important examples as well. I just wanted to touch on something that you talked about earlier as well. Sarah, you mentioned some of the new technologies, more automation, more exploratory research that we're working on. Would you say that NATS is moving at the right pace as some of these other industries that are looking at these topics within and outside of aviation?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, automation is a big one at the moment. Some people would say we're behind the curve on automation, but actually we are a very safety critical industry, and we are certainly doing lots of research in how we can use automation and AI in ATM. So I can give you a couple of examples of that, where we are working with others as well. So for us at the moment, there is automation everywhere. So if you walked into our operations room today, there is a lot of examples of automation. It tends, most of it is more on the decision support tools. So the controller still makes the overall decisions, but they have a lot of tools to help them, to aid them to make those decisions. And we're looking at that sort of next big step of how can the machine start to take on some of those decisions, and really to look at what does the machine do best, or what does the human do best, and start to really build that human machine teaming. So there's lots of work we've got going on looking at those, and we're working with various different universities. We're also starting to look at, we know as we introduce more automation, we're probably going to have to do things differently in terms of safety assurance, validation, all those methodologies in terms of how we do our research and how we introduce it into operation. So we're looking at various different ways of developing that sort of methodologies, building frameworks, and all sorts of things there. We've also got a government-funded research project with the Alan Turing Institute that is looking at delivering the world's first AI system to control a piece of airspace in live trials, and that will be sort of working alongside air traffic controllers to really help manage the sort of complexity of their role. And that will also be looking at some of the more technical and regulatory aspects of using AI in ATM. So there's loads of really good examples of what we're doing. Are we working at the right speed? I think we are, but what we do need to do, and we are doing, is learning from what other industries have done before us. I often use the example of autonomous vehicles. We often get compared to autonomous cars because obviously there's been a lot of work in that area. And if you take an autonomous car and then put cars in lots of different vertical heights and also say, well, if anything goes wrong, you can't stop. That's the sort of environment we're looking at. So it's very complex and it's very safety critical. So we are trying to learn from those industries, but apply it to ATM.
Just following on from that, there's a huge amount as well that needs to be looked at in the trust between the human and any automation or any machine. And I think that's wider than just an aviation. That's wider than aviation. That's kind of touches on any area where AI is being looked at to develop, enhance the areas. And I guess the medical area is quite advanced in some of those AI work, and so it'd be good to leverage off of different areas that have kind of done some work on that as well. And I think there's two sides of it even in this discussion, because not only is it the controller, so into kind of Sarah's world, the controller needs to accept and trust the machines, as well as obviously all the safety assurance that goes alongside it as well. And then in Elizabeth's side, again, there's that kind of link, but also there's the the general person, the general public, and actually the acceptance, for example, of drones flying over in different areas. Will they accept that? And that is kind of something that needs to be looked at as well. As the examples that Elizabeth went through early on, are all areas where people were probably going to be accepting of it, given if it's a medical supply. I know personally I would be happily, if I know that it's blood going from someone to someone else, then I would be quite content with that, having kind of people's personal deliveries through my garden. Maybe I'm not so much. So there is this human acceptance as well that needs to be looked at, and there's lots of different areas of that. And then there's also the ethics behind it as well, and there's a huge amount of research in other industries that we need to leverage off in aviation.
I guess it ties in very well with our word of collaboration. One quick question before we move to audience questions. This is a bit of a different one, but in light of National Inclusion Week this week, and since we have an all-female panel here, I'd like to ask you, why do you think diversity is important for research, and specifically for research in air traffic management? And what advice would you have for any women or girls who are thinking about a career in aviation or a career in research?
So I think diversity and inclusion is essential for R&D. So, what do you want out of research and development? Well, you want diverse thinking. You want people to all challenge each other and be in a safe environment to challenge each other. If you had everyone thinking exactly the same, we would come up with one answer all the time, and that's not getting the best out of research. What you need to do is get the best possible solution in light of what you're trying to achieve. So actually diverse thinking is exactly what you want, and a great way to get diverse thinking is through people's upbringings, their cultures, their religion, how people think. Everyone thinks differently, and embracing that, but also that inclusive nature where you should be able to challenge each other in an environment, in a research and development environment. It's not around whether there's a hierarchical kind of structure in an organization. I think that the R&D team at NATS, I'm obviously going to be slightly biased because I'm head of R&D, but actually everyone can challenge everyone, and that's the environment that we need to make sure we keep, because that's the only way we're going to get the best research and development produced. So it's massively important. I think it's important anyway, but hugely for R&D. I really can't think of anything worse than having everyone thinking the same in this team.
Yeah, I would completely back up Louisa there. I think as a team we are very good at challenging each other, and some of our best solutions have come out from that. So you guys all know that we regularly get together and have big brainstorms where we all throw in ideas and challenge each other, and that's how we come up with our best solutions. In terms of your question on women thinking about a career in aviation or R&D, I'd say if it fascinates you, if you get excited by new challenges, innovation, working as a team, all those things, go for it. It never held me back, and I'm still very excited by the things that I do every day.
I guess it's my turn. So, speaking from a non-R&D sector, but actually I interact with R&D so much that I don't even think R&D is, I feel like R&D is a way of looking at problems rather than an arena. And it's a complex arena. Anyone who works, studies, I see that some people are from the academia, contributes to R&D. In my mind, they're really explorers. And in the heart of exploration, that's innovation, and innovation needs new ideas, people of diverse backgrounds. And diverse backgrounds, as Louisa said, it can be culture, it can be upbringing, it can be value system, it can be, in this case, you chose to pick gender as one of the parameters. People just give new perspectives on how you view a problem before you look at how to brainstorm potential solutions. And most of the time I realize it's actually how you view the problem is the most. It really shifts the needle. So it really changes people's perspectives. And if the situation that I've encountered before and working in other places is the fact that groupthink really stifles innovation, and that point on hierarchy, that is really one of the key factors to unlock that trust, that courage to actually challenge. So you asked about gender, and I have a strong opinion on this, so I'll keep myself to 2 minutes on speaking on this, given that I did a direct master's in aeronautical engineering. I recall being 1 out of 10 girls in a class of 120 people. Do I notice the gender homogeneity? Of course I do, and that carries on to the workplace in aviation. Just yesterday, I was in a call with 6 other gentlemen. I was the only lady. Did I feel a bit uncomfortable? Just a bit uncomfortable. I just got on with it. And I trusted that I have the expertise, the knowledge to contribute to the conversation, the discussion, and then the deliverable afterwards. So I did a cheeky peek at our participant list. Again, it's very male-dominated, but at the same time, it doesn't matter if it's a male-dominated conversation. What carries on is you notice there's a pattern, and you're a potential ally, or people who might feel that they are out of the majority group, and you can play a part to help them feel integrated. It's funny how we talk about airspace integration, and now we talk about integration into the workplace or the environment. Yeah, so I hope that what we said today actually helps someone.
Yeah, I think that was great. Thank you so much. And as a female also working in research, I think, yeah, your voice is important. Your input is as valuable as anyone else's. And working in research is so challenging. It's always different. And yeah, just go for it. So I'm going to move on to some audience's questions now. The first question from Vasilis is, can you describe your vision for using artificial intelligence in air traffic control? Also, thoughts on testing with synthetic AI-generated data?
Yeah, so I can start answering that, and maybe the others can chip in if they've got some added things. So I guess we've kind of explained maybe through the call. I know that question came quite at the beginning, but around artificial intelligence, and that we see it being kind of enhancing the controller, what they're doing going forward. But also, as Sarah kind of alluded to as well, it's around working out what the human is good at and what the system, computer, whatever it looks like, is strong at as well. It will be really tricky, I think. I wouldn't want to stand here saying it would be fully automated, because we're in a safety critical environment, and that's a huge part of how we deal with anything. A good example of where it would be really challenging is with the Hudson crash a few years ago, where actually if you simulated those exact conditions, you wouldn't have had the Hudson landing in the river. So the aircraft landing in the Hudson River. I don't know if I said that wrong then. Actually, how do we deal with those extreme cases where you can't predict that's going to happen, and actually a controller needs to be involved in that somehow? So there is a huge amount of work to look at how artificial intelligence can be integrated, and the safety assurance is the biggest challenge. And the second question on synthetic data, so a part of the Alan Turing Institute work that we're looking at, it will look at a digital twin where we'll have data, and we're trying to look at how that's created. We've just started that work recently, and that will be a 5-year program with them. But that data is going to be key. We kind of all know that data is key for any sort of artificial intelligence work. So actually making sure we've got the right data sets is pretty important as well.
It's probably worth saying that we're still coming up with our vision, I would say, on AI, and a lot of the work that we're currently doing is driving what is going into that vision. So we're still very much learning on where we can use the AI, how we do split, have that split between the human and the machine. So yeah, so I think it's very much in development, and I think there's a session like this on automation. Is it next week? So I'd put you towards that one if you'd like any sort of further in-depth conversation on this side.
I think that's the 13th of October.
Yes, it is. Thank you. We have a second question from Alex Fuller. What impact has Brexit had on your work with partners? And I know that Cesar is a big part of what we do at NATS in R&D, and Cesar is partially funded by the European Union. So has there been any impact from Brexit?
I don't know. Sorry, are you going to say something? Just talk over each other. You go first.
No, I was just going to say that no, our current work in Cesar is continuing as it was before. We still have the same funding coming in, working with the same partners, and we are already starting to plan the next phase of Cesar work as well, which should start in 2023.
I think it just leads on to really about collaboration, doesn't it? Because you can't have, the UK's airspace is, yes, okay, it's defined by, an invisible line, but actually, you want your whole flight. If you're going on holiday from, Heathrow to Greece or somewhere, you want the whole flight to be efficient. You want it all to be joined up. So we do need to collaborate with our European partners, regardless of Brexit. So we will always be needing to use that collaboration to enhance how aviation works as a whole sector, as across Europe, just like we work with partners in Canada as well, to look at oceanic and some of the airspace in that side as well. So it does really come back to the fact that collaboration is key for what we want to do going forward, and Brexit really hasn't impacted that.
That's great to hear. One other question from Alex is, and I think this is going to be our last question, what can airspace and air traffic management do to deliver net zero emissions? Will it play a part in the aviation industry and government's commitment to reach net zero by 2050?
Yeah, so what can airspace? I think we've got a huge part to play in meeting the net zero targets by the government that are set out. As I mentioned before, there's that future, Fly Zero group, and if you just Google Fly Zero, you'll see it, and NATS are participating in that as well, which is looking at how the industry is going to build back better. I think coming back from COVID, we've got a real opportunity to make sure that we're enhancing the environmental impacts. We always have done, though. That's the kind of thing as well. It always has been a huge part of what NATS has researched and what European partners have researched as well. So looking at environmental from a research point of view isn't necessarily something new, but actually the government's kind of setting the targets helps to ensure that we're doing everything we can. And actually, sorry for me just talking, we had there's an article on the NATS website about the perfect flight, which was a flight from Heathrow to Glasgow. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that had an increase of reduced 62%. Is it CO? Sarah's nodding. I think I'm saying that correct. Yeah, reducing CO2 emissions by 62% from a previous perfect flight that happened about 10 years before. So that really shows some of the advances that we've done on the environmental impact. And then just to build on that, and Elizabeth might want to add on something if she does or not. Sorry, Elizabeth, to say that, but actually that's where that electric and autonomous aircraft, the electric side of it, what new things are coming that way, are really going to showcase where we go in the future as well, because they're really setting the example of actually we're building new drones, new uncrewed systems. We need to ensure that they are viable in this future environment as well. So they're really setting the standard as well on what we're doing. And there's a huge amount of work going on this as well with our airline partners.
It's all right, Louisa.
I covered.
No, it's not that. I was going to come in from another point of view, but thank you for covering that bit. So I was actually going to cover the airspace modernization. The fact is, underlying all of this is the genuine desire to make sure that the airspace modernization strategy, the actual what that follows through is it helps to build a sustainable, efficient future for the national airspace structure. And we're working with the CAA, the drone industry, aviation stakeholders will, in fact, there's a lot of initiatives that have come out from CAA and DFT recently on asking, so what exactly do you want from they're asking the industry what exactly do you want and how do we build that better. So it's a good full circle to what Louisa's opening remarks are, and we're heavily involved in the airspace modernization to enable that, to make sure that people are not flying more than what they need to. Yeah.
And I think as well, that's going to be a lot around the general public as well, and that's driving the way the industry is reacting to this as well. That we do have, again, not to try and plug the conference too much, we have got an environmental area on the conference, and so also we are working with academic partners. There's a really good piece of work about contrails that you can go and read about. Again, it's kind of if there are industry academic startups that have ideas, then please get in touch with us, because we are willing to, we want to work with people who are going to help us progress some of those challenges, because it will be a challenge to get to net zero by 2050.
Yeah, and I guess that's the whole point as well of this conference, is for people to get in touch, to know of the work that we are doing at the moment. But if they come up with ideas that could work within what we are doing already, then yes, do get in touch. So our 45 minutes are up. They go by really quickly. I hope everyone has taken something from today and they've enjoyed this session. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for sending in your questions. Thank you, huge thank you to our panelists, obviously, for participating.
And thank you for hosting, Teresa. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you. Keep an eye out for the exhibition. I'm sure you've had a look already, but because you had to sign up for this webinar. But if you haven't, it's a really cool interactive exhibition. So you can have a look at the projects that we are now working on and what universities and industries we're collaborating with. The conference is going to be live until until the 15th of October. And like it was mentioned already, this is the first webinar of a series of 4 webinars for this conference. So we have 3 more coming in the next couple of weeks. The first one is on the 7th of October, and it's about what is next for R&D on aviation's Jet Zero flight path. The second one is on the 11th of October about autonomous drones and air taxis and how we integrate them into current airspace alongside passenger flights. And the last one is on the 13th of October, and it's all about automation in air traffic management, the challenges and opportunities. So if you're interested in any of these topics, sign up for them. You can find more information on the virtual exhibition page. If you have any feedback for us, ideas for future work, if you want to collaborate, if you just want to get in touch, you can contact us through the virtual exhibition again, or you can email us at researchanddevelopment@nats.co.uk. Thank you so much again for watching, and thank you for your questions, and thank you to our panelists, and have a good rest of your Friday and a good weekend. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.